Hi everyone, here is a quick overview of the satellite instruments measuring nitrogen dioxide currently orbiting Earth. So we have two of them that are widely used, the ozone monitoring instrument OMI and the tropospheric monitoring instrument TROPOMI. And the main difference between these two is the launch date and also the spatial resolution. So OMI has a data record extending about 18 years now, going back to October of 2004. But this comes at a somewhat degraded spatial resolution compared to TROPOMI at 24 times 13 kilometers squared. TROPOMI has a data record only about 5 years, less than that, May of 2018, with a spatial resolution that's much finer than OMI. Both of these instruments are what are called polar orbiters. You can see an example in the animation in the top right here. They go pole to pole, but they take measurements in between the poles everywhere around the globe. We don't have any geostationary satellites over North America at the current time frame, but we are hoping to have one next year in 2023 called Tempo that will be taking measurements at all daylight hours across North America. And so how does this instrument measure NO2? Well, it's actually a passive spectrometer that's observing the radiances reflected back from the surface, from the sun to the surface, back to the spectrometer. And these, to calculate NO2, we have to look at radiances in the 400 to 450 nanometer range. And then we can generate a total slant column by measuring the amount of radiation or reflectance back in this wavelength region. And then we do a couple separate things. We separate out the stratospheric component from the tropospheric component, and we use a couple models to then calculate the vertical column, the amount in the troposphere. So it's actually quite a complicated process that's taken multiple decades to refine over time. There can be some large sources of uncertainty, but also it's important to note that there can be updates to these algorithms over time, even though the measurements are, can only be acquired once. All right, so what does satellite data look like on a day-to-day basis? Here's an image of March of 2022. We have the United States. The missing data are the clouds. We have some small P's there. Those are the power plant locations. If we zoom into the New York City area on this particular day, and also other cities in the northeastern United States, we can very clearly see an NO2 plume coming from New York City on this particular day. But sometimes this can be helpful for people, but sometimes annual or seasonal averages can be helpful for people. So this is what I've done, taking an annual average, actually a 20-month average of TROPOMI data, and we can very clearly see a lot of the large NOx emitters in the United States, including major cities, power plants, even some other industrial operations. As expected, New York City, Chicago, and Los Angeles are very large sources of NOx emissions and have the largest NO2 values as well. Let's zoom into New York City. What I really like about this is we can pinpoint the largest NO2 in the entire eastern United States, and this actually occurs right near the Newark airport, so it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody living in this area, but it's amazing that TROPOMI can confirm this when averaged over multiple days, in this case multiple years. Another thing that TROPOMI is great at is getting a first estimate of surface concentration. So I'm not saying this is the best way to estimate surface concentrations, but it is a quick way to estimate surface concentrations. And here I'm showing the quick correlation between the measurements from TROPOMI and the EPA air quality AQS measurements at the surface. And we can see a pretty good R-squared, 0.66. So I have on the right a rough translation of what you would do to estimate the surface concentration from the column content. Hopefully this tutorial has been helpful, giving you an intro to TROPOMI.